My name is Samuel Levine, and for 75 years I lived as an Orthodox rabbi in Brooklyn, New York. If you had seen me on the street, you might have thought I was just another old man with a worn black coat, carrying a stack of books under my arm, hurrying toward the synagogue on Ocean Parkway. My life had rhythm: morning prayers, study, community visits, Friday dinners with challah bread, and the smell of roasted chicken filling the house. Everything seemed steady, predictable, almost ordinary, but deep inside, something was wearing me down. That evening felt no different from any other. Outside my apartment window, I could hear the faint hum of traffic on Flatbush Avenue. A siren wailed in the distance. That familiar New York soundtrack we all get used to. The air smelled faintly of pizza from Sal's Pizzeria down the block, mixed with the bitter sting of exhaust fumes drifting up from the street. I remember sitting at my table, my study lamp glowing over the pages of the Torah. My hands traced the Hebrew letters as they had done for decades. Suddenly, without warning, a sharp pain cut through my chest. It was not the kind of ache an old man dismisses as indigestion. This was different. It was as if a blade had been driven straight into me. I gasped, grabbing the edge of the wooden table, but the room spun wildly, as though I had been shoved into a carnival ride I never chose. The lamplight blurred into streaks, and my head pounded like a drum. My body collapsed under me, and I felt my skull crash against the table's edge. The sound was brutal, like a hammer against stone. I tried to call out, but my voice betrayed me. No sound came. My hands clawed the air, searching for something solid, but there was nothing, only emptiness. My chest tightened as though an iron band had wrapped itself around my ribs, squeezing the life out of me. I could feel the warmth of blood draining from my face. A heavy numbness spread through my arms and legs, like ice water flowing into my veins. The noises of the city faded, muffled, as if someone had closed a thick door between me and the world. My vision dimmed. The last thing I remember seeing was the flicker of that lamp and the sacred text in front of me, letters dancing before my eyes. And then, nothing. Darkness swallowed me whole. In that instant, I knew, this is death. There was no bargaining, no denial, just the terrifying certainty that my 75 years had ended right there in that Brooklyn apartment. On an ordinary night, with the smell of pizza still in the air, the moment the light in my room went out, I expected nothingness. Death, I thought, would simply be silence, like a switch flipped off. A long, dreamless sleep. But it wasn't like that. What came instead was darker, heavier, more real than I had ever imagined. I was floating, not up, not down, just suspended in an endless void. My body was gone. I couldn't feel the weight of my 170 pounds, the ache in my knees from climbing the synagogue steps, or the stiffness in my back after years of sitting in wooden pews. All of that was stripped away. What remained was only me, my thoughts, my awareness, my soul. The silence was suffocating. In New York, you never know silence. Even at 3 a.m. you hear the rumble of the subway under your feet, or the echo of a car horn 2 blocks away. But here, in this place, there was nothing. No sound, no smell, no air. The kind of silence that pressed on my ears like water when you dive too deep. I tried to cry out, but my voice was gone. I tried to move, but there were no arms, no legs, nothing to move with. It was terrifying, like being trapped inside a box without walls. My mind raced back to when I was a boy, hiding in the closet during a storm, hearing the thunder crack like artillery shells outside. I remembered the pounding fear, the helplessness. That same fear now wrapped itself around me like chains. Then came the cold. It seeped into me, not the sharp cold of a winter night in Brooklyn, when the wind slices through your coat, but a dead cold, a numbness that spread from whatever I was into the endless dark. I felt myself slipping, drifting farther away from everything I had ever known. A thought struck me. So this is it. This is what it means to die. But even as I admitted that, another thought crept in. Then why am I still aware? Why am I still me? And then, through the crushing emptiness, I saw it, a dot, a speck of light, no larger than a pinprick, far in the distance. At first I thought it was a trick of my imagination, the desperate hope of a drowning man reaching for something that wasn't there. But the dot grew, slowly at first, then faster, until it was pulsing like a living flame. Something in me stirred, a strange mix of fear and hope. I didn't move toward it, it moved toward me, spreading like a sunrise across the horizon of nothingness. Then, a voice, clearer than any sound I had ever heard in my 75 years. Not loud, not shouting, but carrying more weight than 1,000 sermons. Samuel, son of Abraham, I know you. My whole being froze. The voice was not familiar in the way of a human face you recognize, but in the way of a truth you've always known but never admitted. It cut through me, exposing every hidden corner of my heart. I wanted to answer, but I couldn't. My soul trembled, caught between terror and awe. The voice continued, steady and unshakable. I know your sleepless nights searching for me in the scriptures. But tonight, you will see a truth you overlooked. Those words landed like thunder in my soul. My mind, trained for decades to interpret texts, to weigh arguments, suddenly felt small, like a child hearing his name called in the dark. I was no longer in control. Whatever this was, it was beyond me. The light was coming closer, and I knew something monumental was about to be revealed. The light drew closer until it wrapped around me like a blanket of fire. It wasn't the burning fire of destruction, but a living flame that seemed to see me, know me, and pierce through me. My whole being trembled. I had lived 75 years studying the Torah, the prophets, the ancient commentaries of our people, yet nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for this moment. The voice spoke again, steady and unshakable. Look up, Samuel. Darkness will come, but those who belong to my Son must stand firm. Tell them what you see. Before I could even question what that meant, the scene shifted, no longer floating. My feet pressed onto something solid. I could not see the ground beneath me, yet I knew I was standing. Above me stretched a sky unlike anything over Brooklyn or the Jersey Shore. It was heavy, suffocating, painted in bruised purple, like storm clouds before a hurricane. And then I saw it, the moon. But it was not the glowing white disk I had watched countless times rising above Coney Island or reflecting over the East River. This moon was black, not dim, not shadowed, but black, like a scar carved into the heavens. Its faint outline barely separated it from the sky, as if it had stolen the light from everything around it. The stars, those faithful points of brightness I had admired since boyhood, dimmed until they nearly vanished. It was as though the sky itself had been robbed of breath. A chill went through me, heavier than any winter wind cutting across the Brooklyn Bridge. My hands shook, not from the cold, but from the certainty that this was no natural event. This was a sign. In that eerie silence, the scriptures I had taught for decades suddenly rang in my ears with new force. The sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. Isaiah had said it, Joel had said it, and Jesus, the one I had always rejected, had repeated it in Matthew chapter 24 verse 29. All those years, I had treated those words as metaphors, ancient poetry, perhaps even exaggeration, but now they blazed before my eyes like fire on parchment. This was not history. This was happening. The voice came again, cutting through the suffocating sky. This is the black moon. Samuel, it is not an ordinary eclipse. It is a signal, a marker of the time of judgment. My chest tightened. For decades I had debated end-time prophecies with scholars, dismissing them as symbolic. But here I was, standing under a blackened sky, realizing those words were alive, urgent, pressing. The moon seemed to pull at me, its dark gravity weighing on my soul. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the teacher, the rabbi, the authority. I was just a man, small, trembling, confronted with a truth too vast to deny. Standing under that heavy sky, with the black moon swallowing the light. I felt my whole life come crashing down on me. 75 years of study, of preaching, of clinging to traditions, it all seemed fragile. Like glass about to shatter. The voice broke through the silence again, calm yet unyielding. My son said it, and your prophets said it. The sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. This is no metaphor, it is a warning. Samuel, a wake-up call. The words struck me harder than the pain in my chest before I collapsed in my apartment. I thought of the countless times I had taught Isaiah chapter 13 verse 10 or Joel chapter 2 verse 31 to young men in the yeshiva, explaining that these were symbolic, that they spoke of ancient judgment against nations long gone. I thought of how confident I had been, how sure of my interpretations. And yet, standing there, I realized I had been wrong. The verses were no longer ink on parchment. They were alive, flaming in the sky above me. I remembered one night years ago when a blackout hit New York City. The power went out across Brooklyn. No streetlights, no neon signs, no subway noise. People stepped outside, confused, some frightened, others marveling at the sudden quiet. For the first time in decades, we could see the stars above the city. I thought that night was powerful. But this was different. This was not wonder. It was dread. The black moon seemed to draw the breath out of me. My chest felt heavy, as though the air itself had thickened. My heart pounded against my ribs, and sweat beaded on my forehead though the air was icy. My lips trembled as I whispered to myself, could this be it? Could this be the sign of the end? The voice answered as though reading my thoughts. This is a sign of the great judgment drawing near. It is not random destruction. It is the end of one age and the beginning of another. I will separate the sheep from the goats. Those words pierced me deeper than any blade. I had always believed in God's justice, but in abstract terms. I pictured judgment as a far-off event, something beyond my lifetime, beyond my grasp, but now it was here, close enough to taste in the air, heavy enough to feel pressing on my skin. Fear gripped me. But it wasn't only fear of punishment. It was awe, holy fear. The kind that makes you realize how small you are and how great the one before you truly is. In that moment, all my achievements, all my debates, all my stubborn defenses of tradition, they shrank to nothing. I wasn't a rabbi. I wasn't a scholar. I was just Samuel, a soul laid bare before the Creator. As I stood beneath the blackened sky, the weight of the voice still echoing in my soul, the scene shifted again. One moment I was staring at the scar of a moon, and the next, I was lifted high above the earth. My feet no longer touched the ground, yet I did not fall. I hovered, watching the world stretch out beneath me. But it wasn't the familiar globe I had seen in pictures from NASA, with blue oceans and white clouds. Instead, I saw people, billions of them, men, women, children, every race, every language, every nation. They covered the earth like waves in the ocean. Yet there was no pride in them, no strength. They were all kneeling, not kneeling in worship as I had so often done at the synagogue, but broken, their backs hunched, their heads bowed low. Some clutched their children to their chests. Others held their faces in their hands, their bodies trembling with sobs. The sound was overwhelming, a chorus of grief and regret that rolled across the earth like thunder. It reminded me of the days after September 11th in New York. I remember walking near Ground Zero, seeing strangers holding candles, weeping openly in the streets, people of all backgrounds united in mourning. The air then was thick with ash and sorrow. This vision carried that same weight, but magnified beyond imagination. The whole world was grieving together, as if every soul had suddenly realized the truth they had ignored for too long. Tears welled in my eyes as I took it in. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Their pain was too raw, too real. Yet among the sorrow, I sensed something else, a flicker of fragile hope. As they cried out, they weren't only mourning, they were pleading. Their words blended into a single cry. Forgive us. Give us another chance. And then the light broke through. From the heart of that radiance, a figure emerged, unmistakable, undeniable. It was Jesus, not the image I had dismissed my whole life, not the fragile man on the cross in paintings. No, this was Jesus in glory, his face shining like the sun, his presence radiating power and love that dwarfed everything else. My knees buckled under the sight of him. All my arguments, all my years of rejection crumbled like dust. I had been wrong, terribly wrong. His voice swept over the earth, gentle yet filled with authority. Only those who kneel before me, humble themselves, repent, and believe in me will be saved. There is no other way. The words pierced me. They weren't just for the billions kneeling, they were for me. For Rabbi Samuel Levine of Brooklyn, who had spent a lifetime teaching the law but had missed the one who fulfilled it. As Jesus' voice echoed across the earth, my eyes were drawn to a group set apart from the billions kneeling in grief. They were not on their knees like the rest, but neither did they stand tall. They were bent, struggling, weighed down by something invisible yet crushing. I recognized one face immediately, Donald Trump, not the man in a tailored suit, waving his red cap, shouting, "Make America Great Again," to roaring crowds. No, this was just a man stripped of power, hunched over, his hands covering his head as if the weight of years of choices pressed down upon him. His face was drawn, weary, full of regret. Around him were others. I could not see them all clearly, but I knew who they were. World leaders, billionaires, celebrities, the kind of people whose names filled the headlines and whose decisions shifted the stock market by billions of dollars overnight. Men and women who had shaped nations and commanded armies. Yet here, in this vision, they were reduced to trembling souls, stripped of every title and spotlight. The sight unsettled me deeply. For much of my life, I had assumed the powerful were untouchable, that wealth and influence gave them some shield against the pain ordinary people bore. I had even envied them at times. But standing there, watching them quake under the gaze of Jesus, I realized the truth. No shield, no wealth, no fame could protect them from the judgment of God. The voice rang out again, firm as a decree. Even the mightiest on earth cannot stand outside my judgment. Wealth, power, fame, it is dust before my throne. I will judge every soul by their deeds, without bias, without exception. The words struck me like a hammer. My chest tightened as I thought of my own life. I had no empire, no millions of dollars, no nation under my command. But I had my pride, my stubbornness, my self-righteousness. Before God, those things weighed just as heavily. I remembered funerals I had led in Brooklyn. The casket always looked the same, whether it carried a poor old man from Coney Island or a wealthy businessman from Park Avenue. Death didn't care about bank accounts or accolades. And now I saw that judgment was the same. Every soul would be weighed on the same scales. I felt both terror and a strange comfort. Terror because I saw how nothing was hidden, how even the great and mighty were brought low. Comfort because it meant God's justice was perfect. No bribes, no favoritism, no escape. And as I stood there, trembling, I knew I was no different. I too would face that judgment. As I watched the mighty tremble under the gaze of Christ, the vision shifted once more. The world beneath me seemed to split open, and before my eyes stretched two roads. They were not mere paths of dirt and stone. They were alive, glowing with meaning, pulling at me with an intensity I could feel in my very soul. The first was wide, broad enough for endless crowds. It stretched far into the horizon, paved smooth and lined with dazzling lights. People swarmed it in uncountable numbers, laughing, singing, celebrating. I saw parties that never ended, music pounding, glasses raised high. There were billboards flashing promises of wealth, power, fame, everything the human heart craves. At first glance, it looked like freedom, like the American dream magnified. I could almost hear echoes of Times Square on New Year's Eve. The ball dropping, the confetti flying, the crowd roaring in celebration. But as the road stretched farther, the atmosphere changed. Laughter twisted into shouting. The music grew harsh, dissonant, like sirens colliding with screams. Faces once filled with joy became distorted with greed, lust, desperation, and at the very end of the road, I saw it, fire. A vast sea of flames roaring like a furnace, swallowing the multitudes who marched straight into it. My stomach churned. I wanted to scream at them, to warn them, but no sound came out of my mouth. They thought they were chasing freedom, but it was a trap, dressed up as light, but ending in destruction. Next to it, another road appeared, narrow, rough, uneven. Its surface was jagged, full of thorns and sharp stones. Almost no one walked it. Those who did looked weary, their clothes torn, their bodies bruised, yet their faces shone with a peace I could not explain. They leaned on one another, lifting those who stumbled, encouraging the weak, pressing forward step by step. There were no flashing lights, no music, no riches, only determination, only faith. And at the end of that narrow path, I saw it, a throne radiating with golden light, brighter than the sun, surrounded by voices like a river of song. It was heaven, eternal life, joy that could not be stolen. My heart ached. For so many years, I had chosen paths that looked easy, respectable, even honorable in the eyes of men. But looking at these two roads, I knew I had been closer to the wide one than the narrow. Then the voice of Jesus thundered in my soul. Do you see, Samuel? No one can stand neutral. Every soul must choose, my light or the darkness of destruction. The wide road leads to death, though it seems easy at first. The narrow road leads to life, demanding sacrifice and perseverance, but its reward is priceless. The words pierced me. Terror gripped me as I watched countless souls rush willingly into the sea of fire. But hope rose as I saw the few on the narrow path, steadfast, unshaken, pressing forward toward the throne. For the first time in my 75 years, I understood. Life is not about law, tradition, or pride. It is about surrender, about choosing the narrow way, no matter how hard. As I stood trembling between the wide road and the narrow, the vision shifted once again. From the golden light at the end of the narrow path, a figure approached. It was not a man, nor any creature I had ever imagined, but an angel. The angel's presence was overwhelming. His robes shimmered like woven starlight, and his wings sparkled as though each feather was cut from crystal. His face carried both sternness and compassion, the kind of expression that made me feel small yet strangely safe. His eyes seemed endless, as if they held the secrets of eternity. I could not speak. My knees threatened to buckle under the weight of awe. For years, I had taught about angels, messengers of God, but always as abstract beings, characters in ancient stories. Yet here one stood before me, more real than the streets of Brooklyn I had walked for decades. The angel moved closer with a solemn grace and placed something in my hands. At first I thought it was a scroll, like the Torah scrolls one had spent my life unrolling in the synagogue. But no, this was a book, translucent, glowing from within as if alive. On the cover, etched in letters of fire, was a single number, 822. My hands shook as I opened it. The pages were not made of paper. They burned with words of flame that did not consume but instead seared themselves into my mind. The words blazed. The dark day. The day of testing. Check the oil in your lamp. Each word carried weight, as though the book itself pressed against my chest. I thought of the parable of the 10 virgins that I had always dismissed as a Christian story not meant for me. Yet here it was, alive, undeniable. The wise carried oil. The foolish let their lamps go out. The meaning pierced me. It wasn't about money, or ritual, or status. The oil was faith, real, living faith. The angel's voice rang out, clear and steady, like a bell across a silent city. This message is for all. Stay awake, be ready. Those who prepare their souls, who love, who believe, who live by the word of the Son, They will endure. But those unprepared will be left in the darkness of weeping and gnashing of teeth. The weight of those words pressed down on me harder than the pain of my failing heart. For 75 years, I had relied on the law, on tradition, on my own sense of righteousness. But this book, this fiery truth, told me it was not enough. The oil was missing. I held the glowing book close, trembling. I knew now that 822 was not just a number. It was a marker, a warning, a line in the sand, a day that would test the whole world. And deep within, I understood. I could not keep this to myself. This message had to be shared. The glowing book in my hands burned with truth. But before I could linger on its words, the vision shifted again. The light around me dimmed, and the warmth that had comforted me vanished. What replaced it chilled me to the bone. Before me opened a vast chasm, an abyss so dark and endless that my heart clenched in terror. It wasn't just empty space, it was alive with despair. The pit stretched deeper than the subway tunnels of Manhattan, deeper than any canyon carved by time. I couldn't see the bottom, only blackness swallowing everything. Then came the screams. They rose like a storm, agonized, unending cries that tore through my soul. I saw them, countless souls being swept into the abyss. They weren't shoved, they weren't dragged, they chose it. With each step, they turned their backs on the light, walking willingly into the darkness. Faces flashed before me. People I had known in Brooklyn. Neighbors I'd nodded to on the street. Men who sat in my synagogue. Women I'd passed in the market. Some had lived reckless, godless lives, chasing pleasure and mocking faith. Others were good people, yet indifferent, too busy with careers, money, or comfort to care about eternal things. Now, every mask was stripped away. Their eyes were wide with horror, their mouths frozen in regret. Their screams weren't just of pain, but of realization, realizing too late that they had missed the one thing that mattered. My spirit ached. I wanted to cry out, to beg them to turn back, but it was too late. The abyss pulled them in, its darkness sealing them away from the light forever. It wasn't simply punishment, it was the absence of hope itself. And then, Jesus appeared again, not distant, not hidden, but standing before me, his eyes locked with mine, filled with sorrow deeper than I could bear, yet burning with love unshaken. His voice was gentle but cut like a blade. Tell them, Samuel, tell everyone, darkness is coming, a trial for every soul. Only those who belong to me, who trust in me, will not be swallowed by the abyss. Time is short. This is your mission. I clutched the glowing book, my tears falling. The weight of his words pressed me to the ground. For 75 years, I thought the law was my salvation. But standing at the edge of that abyss, I knew it was only him. The abyss faded, the cries of the lost still echoing in my chest like the toll of a funeral bell. And then, suddenly, I gasped for air. My eyes shot open. The fluorescent lights above me blurred. The sharp sting of antiseptic filled my nose. Machines beeped steadily beside me, their rhythm both foreign and grounding. I was lying on a stiff hospital bed in Manhattan, wrapped in white sheets, an oxygen tube across my face. Nurses hovered nearby, whispering to one another in disbelief. One of them said, "We thought he was gone." My body trembled, not from weakness, though I was frail, but from the weight of what I had seen. I touched the sheets, grounding myself, yet everything around me felt too small, too ordinary after what I had witnessed. My chest rose and fell rapidly as tears welled in my eyes. I saw him. I rasped. My voice cracked from dryness. I saw the truth. August 22nd. It's not just a date. It's a warning. A call to be ready. The nurses exchanged glances, pity softening their eyes. Perhaps they thought I was delirious, confused from the trauma, but I knew better. I wasn't hallucinating. I had stood at the edge of eternity. And I had been given a mission. In the days that followed, as my strength slowly returned, I wrestled within myself. How could I, Rabbi Samuel Levine of Brooklyn, speak of Jesus? My whole life had been built on the law, on traditions, on waiting for a Messiah I had denied. To proclaim his name now felt like betrayal of my people, my heritage, my identity. But his voice still rang in my soul. The black moon, the two roads, the abyss, the book marked 822. They were not illusions. They were commands, truths I could not bury under fear of rejection. When I left the hospital, I began to speak, first to the nurses, then to close friends, even to fellow rabbis. Some turned away, some mocked, some accused me of heresy. But a few listened, their eyes softening, their hearts stirred. That was enough. I realized this was no longer about my reputation or my comfort. This was about obedience, about telling the world what I had seen. Now, when I walk the streets of Brooklyn, I no longer carry just my prayer books. I carry a fire in my chest. I tell anyone willing to hear, darkness is coming. August 22nd is not just a number, it is a marker. A warning. Check your lamp. Is there oil? Is your heart ready? Because I know now, beyond all doubt, that salvation is not in tradition, not in law, not in my own righteousness. It is in him, only him. I was brought back for this reason, to warn, to testify, to call others before it's too late. And though I am old, though my body is weak, my mission is clear. I am Samuel Levine. I died, I saw Jesus, and I came back with a message. Choose the narrow road. Keep your lamp filled. Time is short. The story of Rabbi Samuel Levine reminds us that life is more fragile and urgent than we often admit. He was a man of faith and tradition. Yet only when standing at the edge of eternity did he realize that rituals, heritage, and personal effort are not enough. What matters most is a living relationship with God through Jesus Christ. His visions, the black moon, the two roads, the abyss of lost souls, and the glowing book marked 822, are not just symbols. They are warnings. They remind us that time is short, choices matter, and ignoring the truth will not make it disappear. The lesson for all of us is simple but piercing. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't assume tomorrow will always come. Prepare your heart today, whether through prayer, reconciliation, or choosing the narrow road of faith. Each decision shapes our eternal destination. For an older generation who has seen wars, recessions, and shifting culture, this story echoes what many already sense. The world is growing darker, and hope must be anchored in something stronger than ourselves. Samuel's return is not just his second chance, it is our warning, our invitation.